All right. Good morning. Welcome to our hangout. PAA Africa is broadcasting live here from the third international meeting of agroecology in the city of Botucatu, the state of São Paulo. And it's an honor for me to have these two guests here today who have been dedicating their lives to fighting hunger and to change the way we produce and eat our food. Mr. Milton Rondó is an old friend of ours, Coordinator General of International Actions to Combat Hunger of the Ministry of External Relations of Brazil, and Dr. Vandana Shiva, who needs little introduction. So first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank the organizers of the event for making this possible. And the reason why our two guests are here today is to discuss local circuits for adequate feeding. As you may know, PAA Africa is now promoting local public purchase from smallholder farmers for school feeding based on a very successful policy that we have here in Brazil. And also on October 16th this year, FAO is proposing that we discuss food systems for better nutrition. So it's clear now that we are in a moment that we need to rethink the way we produce, the way we distribute, the way we eat our food. So that's why we are here. So Dr. Shiva, if you could start and you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on how can we go local in a sustainable way, and how could this be incorporated in public policy, and what's the state's role in that, all your thoughts on it?
I think sustainability in agriculture can only be achieved through localization of the food system. And there are many reasons for this. The first is that a globalized trade in agriculture stops producing food. It starts to focus on commodities. The assumption is these commodities will somehow mysteriously feed people, but they mysteriously disappear into the car tanks and mysteriously disappear into factory farms. And 90% of the commodities, particularly corn and soya, are not even in the food system. But even if they were, they aren't worthy of being eaten because they're either loaded with chemicals, they're genetically modified, on every count. They're nutritionally empty. So we have to start thinking of an agriculture that feeds people with nutritious food and safe food and healthy food with the lowest ecological footprint. Globalized long-distance chains are hugely based on fossil fuels, a very big contributor to greenhouse gases, but they're also very vulnerable. All you need is one cyclone and the supply of a country can be stopped. So long-distance chains are contributors to climate change and vulnerable to climate change. But these long-distance chains are also extremely wasteful. All the studies that are emerging today, that 50% of the food in industrial agriculture is being wasted. Because when you take food that far, then you have to put the best before label, then you've got to throw the bread away, you've got to throw the fruits away, you throw the vegetables away, half of the food of the world that could be eaten. The minute you shift to local circuits, the first most important thing is everyone who eats starts to become conscious about where the food was grown and how the food was grown. They start becoming part of a food community, very appreciative of the work of ecological farmers locally producing healthy food. And instead of anonymous food, you now know where your food comes from. In India, with these long-distance supply chains, we've just had a very, very serious tragedy where 23 children died because of pesticides in the lunch meal. Now that would not happen if they knew exactly where the vegetables are coming from and there was no pesticide use in it. But long-distance chains have also, as we can see, reduced our food basket from 8,500 plants that humanity ate to about 8 globally traded commodities. The children who ate the pesticide-laden food were eating a meal of soya in a country with the most magnificent dals, the pulses, the nitrogen-fixing crops that give us free nitrogen for the soil and healthy protein for our vegetarian diet. Globally traded commodities have taken away diversity from the diet. In the process, they've robbed people of nutrition. And now even the poor in India are getting diabetes because they're being fed pure white rice. A local food system would cater to the food and nutritional needs of the local community. There would be biodiversity on the farms, but there would be biodiversity on the plate. And all science is now telling us that without diversity, you cannot have a healthy, nutritious, balanced diet.
Yes. Well, and what is, in your opinion, we are working with 5 African countries, and the context that we see are of very weak market chains to which the farmers can access, and also the production systems sometimes are going through a lot of trouble. So for you, what would be the first steps to improve local circuits in the production side, also in a sustainable way, implementing agroecological methods?
Yeah, I think all public policy interventions begin with the most vulnerable, because it's assumed that the better off in society can take care of themselves. They want organic, they can go buy organic. They want vegetables, they can go buy vegetables. And because public policy begins with the vulnerable, it's very often assumed, which I think is a very wrong assumption, that the poor can be fed trash. Now, the poor are made of the same flesh and blood as the rich are. And as human beings, they have the same right to healthy, safe, nutritious, balanced food. So using the interventions that come for getting food to schools or getting food to the poor, what public policy needs to design is full systems, which then can be taken up by other elements of society or other dimensions of public policy. Take the issue of feeding the poor. My calculations show that we in India are spending about ₹1 trillion to make this happen. But then we are buying the worst of food, rotting in godowns, imported with pesticides and all kinds of residues. When ₹1 trillion for a shift to ecological production and local procurement would make a revolution. It would stop the suicides of our farmers who are in agrarian distress. 284,000 farmers have committed suicide. It would stop the migration, rural to urban, which is not a migration of choice. It's a migration of being forced off the land. It would stop the unemployment that is being generated as the countryside loses work, but there's nothing in the cities except picking garbage. Hardly a dignified way to be able to meet your needs. And third, it would address the very serious ecological crisis we face. It would also address the hunger and malnutrition crisis. So it isn't that there's lack of money, it's just going for the wrong thing. If we add all the subsidies of the world, globally and nationally, $400 billion given in the OECD countries that are distorting world food prices, making it extremely cheap for companies to buy from farmers, dumping with subsidies, and then allowing the speculation to take food away from people by making food a commodity. All of these distortions can be addressed by the simple act of building local circuits to ensure that commitments of the Convention on Biological Diversity, all the commitments of the human right to food, all the commitments of the UN of the Zero Hunger Challenge, all of those commitments are met from the local to the global level.
Great.